On the night of August 15, 1971, a few sentences spoken on a television screen changed the definition of money forever. From that moment on, nothing carried in wallets remained tied to gold, silver, or any physical value. Value was no longer agreement, it was belief. And belief is always fragile. Some historians consider this moment the birth of the modern economy. Others describe it as a kind of quiet break from reality, from security, from all the old assumptions about balance. Even today, every paper note used in daily transactions rests on a promise that has continued since that night. And promises in history have never been kept forever. For most of human existence, money was something you could hold and feel. A gold coin had weight. A silver piece could be melted down. The material itself held the worth. Kingdoms could stamp their faces onto the metal, but the value lived in the substance, not the symbol. This was not random, it was protection. Metal is difficult to copy. You cannot manufacture gold from nothing. You cannot wish silver into being. That limit, that natural boundary made people trust it. And when people trusted it, it became money. By the early 20th century, most countries had stopped using pure metal for everyday purchases. But the metal was still there, hidden underneath. Paper bills were like tickets. They were claims. If you wanted, you could walk into a government building and exchange your paper for actual gold. This system had a name, the gold standard. And for a long time, it kept the machinery stable. The gold standard was a cage, not a comfort. It set limits. Governments could not create money freely, because every dollar or pound had to match a real pile of gold sitting somewhere in a vault. If a nation wanted to spend more, it had three choices: collect more taxes, borrow money, or dig up more gold. There were no easy exits. Then war arrived, not once, but twice. And wars burned through money faster than mines can pull metal from the ground. Governments needed to spend immediately. They could not wait for gold shipments, so they bent the rules. They printed more bills than they had gold to cover. They told their people it was temporary, an emergency measure. That is what they always say. By 1944, much of Europe lay in ruins. The global financial system had shattered along with the cities. The winning nations gathered at a mountain resort in New Hampshire, a place called Bretton Woods, to build something new. The deal they made was straightforward. The United States dollar would be tied to gold at a fixed price, $35 for 1 ounce. Other countries would link their money to the dollar. The dollar became the center, and because the United States held most of the world's gold at that time, the center seemed strong. For about 20 years the system functioned. Economies rebuilt themselves. Trade grew. Dollars moved across borders, accepted almost everywhere, because people believed they were backed by something solid. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. The United States government was spending more than its gold could justify. The Vietnam War drained billions. Programs at home expanded. Money flowed out faster than gold could cover it, and some countries began to notice. France, in particular, started asking difficult questions. If a dollar is truly worth gold, then we would like to collect ours. In 1971, the French government sent a ship across the ocean to pick up their gold. It was not a threat, it was a request. But it exposed the truth. There was not enough gold in American vaults to honor all the paper promises that had been made. The system only worked as long as no one actually asked for their metal back. That August night, an American president sat in front of cameras and announced a change. He said the United States would stop exchanging dollars for gold. He called it temporary, a safeguard against speculators. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when no one knows how to reverse it. The door closed, and it stayed closed. What happened next was not disaster. It was transformation. The dollar no longer had a fixed price in gold. Its value floated, rising or falling based on how much people wanted it and how much existed in circulation. And more than anything, its value depended on trust. As long as people believed a dollar was worth something, it was. One by one, other nations did the same. Within a few years, every major economy had let go of gold. Money became something different. It was no longer a claim on metal. It was a claim on confidence. The government said it had value, and enough people agreed, so the system kept moving. Some people saw this as freedom. Without gold holding them back, governments could act quickly when trouble appeared. They could create money to stop economic collapse, to keep banks alive, to fund projects. The chain had been removed. But others saw danger. If a government can create money whenever it chooses, what prevents it from creating too much? The answer, in theory, is self-control. But self-control in practice is rare. And this is where meaning begins to slip. Before 1971, a dollar meant a small piece of gold you could claim, even if you never did. After 1971, a dollar meant a belief that someone else would accept it tomorrow. One is a thing, the other is a hope. In the years that followed, the creation of money accelerated. Central banks printed more. Governments borrowed larger amounts. Debt, which used to be something nations avoided except during war, became normal, permanent even. The system had learned it could borrow from the future without immediate consequences. And so it did. Through the 1980s and 1990s, the world seemed to stabilize. Prices calmed down, at least on the surface. Technology advanced, borders opened, wealth grew, though not evenly. The dollar remained the most trusted currency on the planet. People used it, saved it, traded in it. But underneath, something else was happening. With money disconnected from anything physical, the gap between price and reality began to stretch. Houses cost more, stocks climbed higher, but wages moved slower. Wealth pooled at the top, while people in the middle worked harder to keep up. There is a pattern here, though it is not often discussed. When money is created, it does not land everywhere at once. It flows to certain places first, to banks, to investors, to those who hold assets. By the time it reaches workers or savers, prices have already risen. The benefit has already been absorbed. This is not conspiracy, it is structure. The system rewards those who are close to where money enters. Everyone else arrives late. This pattern repeated itself during the financial crisis of 2008. Banks had made risky bets. The bets failed. The economy began to collapse. Governments responded by creating money on a scale never seen before. They called it rescue. And in one sense it worked. Banks did not vanish. Markets recovered. But something else happened too. Housing became harder to afford. Savings earned almost nothing. People who kept their money in cash watched it lose value silently, while those who owned property or stocks saw their wealth grow. The pandemic in 2020 brought another wave. Trillions more created, stimulus checks sent out, loans extended, markets surged to record levels, even as supply chains broke and grocery prices climbed. Some argue this is simply how modern systems must work, that without the ability to act quickly, small problems turn into large ones, and large ones into collapse. That flexibility prevents disaster. Others argue the system has become dependent, that every crisis is now met with the same response. Create more money, add more debt, push the problem further into the future. That motion has replaced meaning. There is no clear answer to which view is correct. But one thing is measurable. Since 1971, the distance between what money represents and what it buys has widened. A dollar today purchases far less than it did 50 years ago. Not because dollars disappeared, but because so many more of them exist. And when there is more of something, each piece is worth less. This brings up a question that sits quietly in the background. If money only holds value because people believe it does, and if that belief depends on systems that create more money whenever pressure builds, then what happens when people stop believing? History provides some clues. Germany in the early 1920s printed money to pay war debts. Prices doubled every few days. People carried wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread. The currency died not from war, but from printing. Zimbabwe tried the same in the 2000s. So did Venezuela more recently. In each case, the government created money to solve problems, and in each case, the population eventually stopped trusting it. Once trust broke, the money became paper again. These are extreme examples. Many would say they do not apply to larger, more stable systems, that the United States, or Europe, or other developed regions have stronger foundations, deeper trust, better institutions. That may be true, but trust is still just trust. Institutions are still made of people, and people make decisions under pressure. History is full of systems that seemed solid until very suddenly they were not. The day money lost its meaning was not the day it stopped working. It was the day it stopped being tied to anything outside of shared belief. That belief is held so far, but belief is not the same as certainty. What does this mean for someone living now? It means the numbers in bank accounts, the cash in wallets, the balances on screens, all of it rests on a decision made decades ago that was never revisited. A decision that value would be a story, told and retold, and the story would hold as long as enough people kept listening. Some people react to this by looking for alternatives. Gold, still, after all these years, land, objects that exist in the physical world. Others experiment with newer ideas, currencies built from computer code, promising limits through math instead of metal. Whether these offer real safety or just different kinds of risk remains unclear. What is clear is that money today is not what it was. It moves faster. It bends more easily. It responds to crisis with speed. But it is also thinner, more abstract, more dependent on systems most people do not see and do not control. The machinery runs quietly. Central banks adjust rates. Governments issue bonds. Markets shift. And life continues. built on the assumption that the numbers mean something stable. But stable is not the same as permanent, and meaning is not the same as substance. On that night in 1971, something broke without a sound. No alarms, no panic. The system adjusted and kept going. But a line was crossed. Money became a belief held collectively, and collective beliefs throughout history have a way of dissolving when conditions shift. The question is not if that shift will come. The question is what will be left standing when it does.